Hello and welcome to another modelling video. This is Alan from the McConaughey at YouTube with another Q&A session. Last week I asked you to field a bunch of questions. Today I will answer them. Apologies that it's a few days late. I'm spreading out uploads a bit more to fulfill an ongoing catalogue of releases instead of 2 posts per week. Generally the channel's been doing very well, though unfortunately I am bogged down with more hours as work as discussed last time. I'm actually so flat out. I'm at work right now filming and editing this before I go home, as there's a few hours of peace and quiet around 1 in the morning. Excuse any background noises or whatnot, but the channel and all my other outlets have been doing very well, and due to the backlog of content, it is going to be going for a lot longer till we start getting some blackouts. Also, big announcements mentioned in the intro last week that I've completed a mould for the injection moulding machine to test out a basic runner as long and wide as possible. That would be done out of resin with an inner filling to act as a heat sink. So as soon as the final settings on the Spark Maker is sorted out with the new resin, I'll be producing and testing that as soon as humanly possible, being more injection molding content. I'm also experimenting with Monocure 3D rapid resin, which works completely different to any other UV resin I've used, and been getting all sorts of different results. A video is coming out on that, but I'll be using some other products that they have available, as well as other brands that have announced a thermo resin for injection molding. On the bench, unfortunately, I've been very lax in building due to all other requirements I'm going through. I've got this ROG Mac that I just really wanted to build. I started after Model Expo and have not gone far with it, though it's a pretty nice diorama build. I finished this tank, nothing too special, thinking of 3D printing a couple of models as they're very quick to paint and whip up. A shout out to K Scale Models. They've been absolutely wonderful in hooking me up with 2 resin aftermarket paints kits for the World War II M4 Sherman. So I've got an M10 Logan and an M3 Lee. As soon as I get my hands on one, I'll build one, test it out, unbox the other one, or eventually both of them. So thank you, Stefan, very much for receiving these kits. I've done an unboxing and started documenting them, though I haven't really shared the posts yet. My sincerest apology. Also have a look at K-Scale Models Facebook page, because they're undergoing all sorts of aftermarket kits, model kits made out of resin 3D printing as the new medium of the hobby, and access to garage kits. They're very affordable. They're from the UK. The projects are really cool. We've got this picture of a 1/144 Drake class ship from Gundam Seed that's going to be printed on a filament 3D printer. A lot of these cool things can also be seen on the Facebook page, 3D Printed Gunpla, where a lot of people are making aftermarket sets for their existing kits, or whole kits altogether, like large busts. If you're looking for some very fresh, interesting content, or a new type of modelling that will excite you, this is a completely different hobby and a lot of fun. Also attempting this as a commission, a Kodabaki video game ship. It looks absolutely stunning. This is probably one of the hardest and most intricate builds that I've attempted in a long time. A traditional scale model approach is very tricky. So that's all the updates out of the way and roughly what I'm doing. I really appreciate with you guys that when I do a Q&A session and I only have a few simple, quick to answer questions, you don't mind that I add a bunch of filler on, extra bits and pieces to buff out a long run video and share a lot of cool stuff, be a bit playful with the editing of video, and new methods that are inappropriate for a main video that's referenced and archived for tutorials or builds. Straight into the Q&A sessions. First is not even a question. Plastic Oddities by Tristan. I can't wait for Animanga and catch up. We all should know about Tristan now, as I've been shouting him out for one reason or another every month with good reasons. We also know that I'm running the event Animanga, the Gunpla and Plamo workshop, as well as competition. Tristan, I normally meet him at the Sydney Gunpla Builders World Cup, but in turn he's going to be travelling to Melbourne to contribute and hang out there, so we'll look at doing some sort of collaboration video and play around, have a very good time. On his channel that I'd like to talk about in the content that he's making, as he attended the Australian Gunpla Builders World Cup, Master Kawaguchi was in attendance and did a panel translated by Lincoln from Paint on Plastic, and he talked about the rules of the Gunpla Builders World Cup and some tips and tricks in the mindset of the judging process. It's been an enigma for us for a long time. It is recorded in Noisy Hall and there is a time delay of translations, but this is the first time this information has ever been publicated in English and translated, so it's very worthwhile going on his channel and having a look. If there is an interest for an abridged version, I would very much like to research, dig deeper, ask questions, and probably make an updated 2019-2020 video on the GBWC rules. Let me know if there's any interest in that, as well as a review and photos from the Australian Gunpla Builders World Cup, which there's been a bit of a media blackout regarding that. Tristan also runs the Australian Mushing Krieger Facebook group and Builders Group Australia. They've been doing some great stuff. There's some good builds. Lincoln from Paint Plastic is also involved, and I'm being gifted this very lovely t-shirt very soon. As we are talking about Animanga 2019, this is going to be on the 24th, 25th of August. It's a traditional anime convention where there's streaming and a hall with trading, people coming in costume, all the typical fanfare, but there's a large wing of the building dedicated to activities, clubs, cultural displays. There's a Lego group, an art large group where they do origami, drawing, manga, all of that sort of thing, ball jointed dolls, and we've got a very large slack of real estate where there will be a display competition that people can bring in models to enter and display, a sales table with very basic kits to build, giveaway kits for absolute beginners, all that sort of thing. You can bring in tools, sit down, build, socialise, buy stuff, all that sort of thing. Lots of very talented local modelers are being invited to come assist and show people some new tricks, tips, or just generally socialise. It'd be a very good social environment to meet, greet, make friends, get to know people in the Melbourne Australian scene. I'll be revealing the Salt Mine Hobby Shop number 2 garage kit. Number 1 is going to be a tutorial one, but this will be the first serious model that I'll be releasing, which will be about 1/144th or about 15 centimetre tall, depicting a Japanese design robot outside of the Gundam copyright sphere or universe, depicting a vintaged subject. So it's going to be seen there for the first time in its glued together, articulated glory, and eventually sometime once the moulds are machined, injection moulded with plastic and released, there will be a model kit for purchase. For those who don't want to buy it, ship, whatnot, the mesh file or the STL file of a brick version of the model is going to be released on Thingiverse to be downloaded and 3D printed absolutely for free. A follow-up from last time, Sim Racer Flight Sim 1000. Hi there, I've just fixed my problems with my Pache Talon. I now use it with a 0.66mm nozzle setup for spraying cleaners and Mr. Surfacer, Gaia Notes, Tamiya Surface Primer, as well as Badger Primer. Thank you very much for the follow-up. It's good to see that a lot of the experiments, tips and tricks posted on the channel that helps out, and there's definitely results. Normally when you have some sort of issue with the airbrush that you put too much air and nothing's spraying out, or it's spraying too much and splattering all sorts of messes onto the surface, it's guaranteed to be a nozzle issue, as they're the first to wear out, damage and split. That's the first thing to look on the exterior for your split marks, as well as look at the back for any clogging and the very tip of the needle. As that doesn't resolve the issue, or there's nothing obvious, then you work your way backwards. But always happy to help out with airbrushing issues, as I really struggled to learn when I was a beginner, even with the plethora of resources out there. Michael the Diesel Spotter, love these names. What do you think was the best German tank of World War II? Not the biggest fan of German armour, but they had a very big influence in tank and armour doctrine used in warfare, and they produced quite a number of designs and models that were very effective. Not the best at the time in the beginning, but were quite dominant later on. Even though it was an experimental time, there were failure models and very effective models. I didn't think the tactically and powerful and all that sort of thing in the video games, certain tanks might have advantages, disadvantages, but when you look at the field reports, the history, the outcome of what happened on the day, they were very vulnerable to external influences, mostly aerial, as well as infantry around, causing all sorts of issues. Generally the smaller tanks were far more effective in going further, breaking down less, evading people, aircraft, all that sort of thing, even though they weren't able to take down larger targets. Early war, I really like the Panzer IV. The Panzer I and II were also pretty good. As the war progressed, they were still in production and upgraded and refitted with larger guns, thicker armour, all that sort of thing, but the same chassis just kept going on and were serviceable and salvageable. Later in the war, the Herzer, with all the updates of what modern armour was doing at the time, with sloped armour, larger guns, slimmer profiles, this was a very good hit-run, tactile, guerrilla warfare tank. It was able to pop out of nowhere, pump out some of the wheels, the tracks, the lower bits of tanks, and just disappear, and it sort of caused a lot of issues on the Eastern Front against an opponent that had numerous forces. I'm not so much a fan of your Tigers and your Panthers and all that sort of thing, as they were not able to travel too far away from the motherland, and had a thing of being either abandoned due to the cost of parts and fuel, taken out by air attacks, or just breaking down before they could get too far. So smaller tanks always did it to me, until the modern day today, where you've got the technology and the know-how to do what they do with computer systems and satellites. So that early bit of very primal tanks, that's a lot of fun to study, analyse and model for sure. Sorry to all my science fiction Gundam friends, you probably had all of that go over your head. Morgan H. Is there a good way to paint white armour by hand brushing with Vallejo or similar products? I'm having trouble painting in white for my Space Marines. I talked about white in almost every video. Always happy to bring up white again, and even though it's a bit of a mantra, you're all very happy to hear. White is in a visual effect, it's almost psychological than visible, but the white pigment is also a very expensive pigment, being titanium powder, and they generally put a lot less of this in hobby paints, thus making it more translucent, and when you apply them over a darker surface, it doesn't have a nice, bright, vibrant white look to it. And there's tricks to have the effect of white without being a true white, but your brain or anyone looking at it thinks it actually is white. And the first trick is not just grabbing a bottle of white and slavering it on the surface straight off. You need to spend a lot of time thinking about the primer, the undercoats, what's underneath the white, until the white looks bright. There's a few ways around it, from mixing a high titanium pigment paint into the paint you're applying, all the way to controlling your undercoat. And what I like to do is apply silver. Silver has a very dense pigment, it's very shiny, it reflects and bounces lights off it, and once you put the more translucent white over it, silver kind of comes through a bit in its sheen and brightness, and it has the visual appearance of being a very bright white. Second tip is using a very, very, very light grey that almost has the appearance of being a white, and then you do your shading and highlights with white, so you don't never actually paint with the blackest black and the whitest white, as if you paint something with a super light grey and you want it to go lighter, then you can crack out the white and apply that. As this is all done by hand, with your surface, you've got your primer, your surface, you are able to hand paint silver. It's not a big deal, you do it more in a dry brushing fashion that has no brush streaks and it sheens quite nicely. Lacquers and enamels are beautiful to apply with silver, as they're bright and vibrant. You can do the same with acrylics and polyurethanes. Once that dries sufficiently, then you overly thin down the white, so when you apply it, it kind of pulls and not leave brush strokes. And as that dries, you keep building up the layers until you've got that effect of white or a really light grey with white on top of that. It's going to take so much more time planning and understanding the layers and building it up, but visually speaking, it's going to look white and it's going to look brilliant, opposed to something that's dirtier and drabbier and just bringing out the undercolours of the primer or the plastic or whatever. Also, when you're painting white, you paint white first and then you put the darker colours on top of that, as it's not coming from underneath above, it's sitting on top, and it's sitting on something that's quite bright and vibrant. Benzone, definitely commented here before. Have you seen the 6 volt rotating LED beacon lights to use on RC cars and truck models? I sure have, railway as well. They look really impressive and they're pretty cheap on sites like eBay, but they always have free wires coming out of the base. My question is, do you know how one of these lights can be fitted to a normal plastic model, not RC, using just a small battery pack? Would it still work? Being electronic, it would definitely work. I asked for more clarification and we've got a link to where you can buy the model, and the part is called an FZRC rotary beacon. Having a look on Google, there's a few different colours and effects, including tops for police cars or modern police cars. Now you've got 3 wires, and basic of electronics, you've got your active and neutral, you run power through it, goes in the input, comes out of the output, and the byproduct is the light or kinetic energy that's going around. I understand a bit about electronics, but I'm not an expert in fabricating original circuits. But you've got a power supply, you need to regulate the power supply through resistors and whatnot. You can consult guides and tutorials to electronic circuit designs or engineering. A 6 volt output through some resistors. You've got 2 wires. The reason why you have 2 wires is one is the signal indicating for the LED to turn on, and one is a signal indicating for the little mechanism to start spinning. They all go to the same output and come out to the back of the battery. So for a very basic circuit where it's on and off, it's spinning, it's flashing, that will work out through some trial and error with a power supply and a few components. If you want to be far more complex, where you can control the speed, the intensity of the light, I've got a link down in the description below with the circuits on how to be more playful, the components you'll need to buy, and how you can manipulate and control that. If that is a little beyond you, the output of the spare RC channel is around 6 volts, but that's the absolute maximum before this thing blows. You will want to cut it down with resistors or diodes quite a bit. And your third option is an Arduino microcontroller, which you plug into a computer and you can give it programming information that's simple of how many volts when it turns on and off, speed, that sort of thing. There's a plethora of tutorials and guides on how to use an Arduino microprocessor. There's beginner guides on YouTube. They'll be very handy. They're very cheap, but if you're definitely in the realm of electronics, you want little lights, you want flashing lights, you want sort of effects, servo motors to spin, open, close things, Arduino would probably be absolutely ideal for the sake of ease of just being able to program a code, have the wires come in and out, and program it away, opposed to building a whole circuit from absolute scratch. There will be a little experimenting, researching and further Googling to go ahead, but it's definitely at the price of this spinning LED worth buying and having a play with. I've had a couple of circuits of flashing LEDs for the use of eyelashes or nails, and they're very simple, very fun, very funky, so definitely explore all of that. I've also, it's been a good month of comments, especially from big companies. SparkMaker had a look at my new video about their troublesome faulty screens and told me the obvious of updates the firmware in a 10-minute expose of explaining why it's broken, the experiments I've done changing the firmware, as well as actually needing to change the screen. So I don't think they've watched the video quite hilariously. An anonymous question on Facebook delivered. Hey Alan, quick question for you. I've seen you did a review on the Iwata HPC Plus airbrush. I just bought one second hand and noticed that there is no O-ring in the nozzle. Do you know if that is normal for Iwata nozzle, or if the previous owner might have lost it? Now, the thing about that pattern of Iwata is the nozzle output is generic, dating back all the way to Olympus, and the nozzle is also manufactured very cheaply, and there's some incarnations that I've seen on Amazon and eBay that I've bought and used with great amount of success on this channel that has the O-ring missing. They drop it by about 10-11 cents with no O-ring, and generally tightened enough, it's not going to make much of effect and work quite well. So probably what happened is the original owner has damaged the nozzle, replaced it with one of these cheap ones, bought one with no O-ring, or cleaned it in thinner and the O-ring has melted off. Use it, and if it isn't ideal and the beeswax method doesn't quite work out, just buy another one with an O-ring from wherever you can source one, being eBay, Amazon, hobby shops, and that should give you a far superior result. I'm also experimenting with another viewer on a new method of sealing nozzles and other threaded components on an airbrush with damper grease, which expands under pressure or over time, and just blocks any sort of micro leaks that may be there. Once I purchase it and play around with it, I'll definitely give a result. But on the screen you should see a finger and a nozzle with no O-ring. If your nozzle looks like that, it's just a generic nozzle, and you can change it very cheaply. The next two images I'm flicking through are Pache, other brand and style of nozzles. These ones are far more expensive and need to be gotten from the manufacturer. They generally have thicker walls and do not damage as easily. James Spencer, who has visited my channel multiple times, not a big fan. You don't sharpen your needle like that clown, on a video where I was maintaining a needle that was either too long for the nozzle, or I had a quick bent kink to it and was broken off and sharpened on a bit of sandpaper and polished up. He seems to be a gentleman from the United States, part of an airbrushing art community, which is very different to the modelling community, and wanted to touch up on this, as well as is some supporting evidence of other communities and tutorials sharpening needles in a similar sense. Sometimes I am wrong in some of these things, and that's cool. I showcase what I do and people follow suit. But with airbrushing, there's many mediums, many styles. People put inks and thinner, almost water-like substances through the airbrushes to paint on paint, tattoo, flesh work, clothing, dyes, shoes, leathers, that sort of thing, to substances that are far more thicker, higher velocity, such as paints, primers, microfillers. And I've come over time to accept that airbrushes are sold as generic as possible to fit a wide variety of artistic, technical, hobby-like or professional uses, and point 3 works perfectly for something as fine as water to as thick as putty paint, but it doesn't quite work out ideally for the products that we use in our hobby of scale modelling, colouring a paint or a tank or a car to applying thicker substances. And highly recommend normally using a 0.5mm nozzle, which would not be as ideal in their community. I find there's a lot of brand loyalty, and sometimes the odd uncolourful spectator can be quite nasty in feedback and directing views to a different platform that has a completely different opinion on branding and use of the airbrush. It is up to you guys how you take it and all, but I'm generally aware of them. It is a bit irritating, but in the end I am a guest to the airbrush community on YouTube that is its own tight-knit thing, and my views are very controversial on using cheaper instruments and modifying them to the point where they work very, very well for our uses at a much cheaper budget. It's only one of many tools in our arsenal, where in other hobbies it's the absolute whole thing. Mr. Spencer also has made a mention of a butt plug. I believe he hilariously isn't aware that I used such an object in combining it with a Gundam and airbrushing it. So a lot of humour there, but he'll definitely be back. We've also got the guys who make the ultrasonic knife that I reviewed a while ago leave a very friendly and kind comment. I've left a link in the description of their new channel showcasing their new products. That would be very worthwhile checking out. Echotech, thank you very much, and hope you enjoy your shout out. Mike S is another one of these gentlemen, a part of the airbrushing community. This one is far more hilarious. This guy sucks at doing reviews. I watched 2 and will never watch another one of his videos again. And looking at his YouTube channel, I love interacting with Americans. And I know people are like, everyone here is not like that, and I absolutely understand that, but I always have the biggest trouble with English, Australian and American viewers for some reason. And even though I've sort of delved in the uglier side of YouTube comments, which is a mixed bag of people being very kind and friendly to constructive criticism, very few of bad, sometimes you get excellent feedback like this. This is getting end and wrapping up to our Q&A session. Just recently Bandai Sunrise has announced the new Gundam series, a new line of models. Not a fan of it. It looks like children's toys. I've seen comments such as they look like the dollar store knockoff toys. I wouldn't go that far, but it's something I will not be exploring. Thought I'd throw my 2 cents in there. But this Gundam chicken dragon thing, high grade chicken, I'm buying this. This thing is very, very, very cool. I like it. I don't even know if I'm going to watch the show. But that does it. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed it, picked up a few tips, or even if it's just entertaining and fun to listen to. I've definitely thoroughly enjoyed filming and making this. Always feel free to ask questions in private message or videos. I'm very happy to interact, even though sometimes it can be a bit slow, and just running the channel is a hobby and joy in itself. I do wish to free up a little more time to build some more models, but the majority of my time at the moment is soaked up in finishing this prototype for the salt mines of my second release model. It is incredibly cool. I think you guys will really enjoy it. Even just a video of showing the drawings, dry fitting it, painting it, releasing it, and injection molding stuff. You guys will definitely enjoy viewing that, and eventually will hit market for people to consume. But I'm definitely itching to get to the bench and smash a few models together, do a bit of free printing, and just have a lot of fun. And I am absolutely over myself and super excited for Animanga and getting a chance to meet, hang out, have fun. For the people that die hard and staying at the end, we're going to go out for drinks and dinner at the end of the Saturday. That is just going to be absolutely mind-blowingly awesome. And I'm looking at doing different events next year. I might return to the GBWC, but I'm also going to go to Japan early next year to research Wonder Festival, being a kits producer. I think the end goal, not the total end goal, but the next tier of a goal after releasing a kit is trading there. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. If anyone watching this happens to be a garage kit producer and has traded or attended Wonder Festival and want to give me some insight, would love to talk and hear all about it, because the set of rules and the paperwork I'm looking at is nothing like I've ever been familiar with, and it's nothing like I imagined that the rumours of how Wonderfest runs are the case, especially with copyrights. All of that, thank you very much. Meme on, build on, happy modelling. Catch you guys later. Have a look at the social media links down below. I put a lot of stuff and builds on Facebook, even though most of the time it's just sharing and stuff. Total catalogue is shared of builds on Pinterest. Great platform for looking at all sorts of models, artwork, reference material. That's good fun. And have a look at Patreon to support any of the stuff I'm doing. Sometime in the future I would like to lean more heavily on the salt mines and producing kits and spend more time delving in the hobby, but it's only a small thing that I'm slowly building up and will not dive in immediately. Catch you guys next time. Stay tuned for more.